Welcome to When Life Gives You Lumens. This is a podcast series offering valuable, unbiased insight on the current and future state of the solar industry with a slant towards technology and how installers can scale effectively. The origin of this name is intentional. Did you know that lemons are not a naturally created fruit? Nature didn't make it. Humans actually made lemons, and it is up to us to find a purpose for them, hence lemonade. Now, this is analogous to the current climate challenges and energy mix transition in our world today. Humans made the unnatural impacts of climate change by our reliance on fossil fuels to power the planet. As a result of this, not naturally, it created a circumstance, and humans have to figure out what we're going to do to get off the fossil fuel problem. Hence solar, hence how can we make lemonade of this situation? Now, the big question and the theme for this podcast episode is who's going to do all the actual solar installation work? Who's going to put all that glass on the roof or on the ground? In 2020, the Solar Energy Industries Association, the industry's leading lobbyist organization, SEIA as it's known, set an ambitious goal of having solar constitute 30% of the US electricity mix by 2030. I believe we currently are at between 4 and 5%. Nearly 7% of US homes have solar, and the number is expected to double by 2030, according to Abby Hopper, SEIA's president. And there's some optimism behind some of these lofty forecasts. In 2021, the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, President Biden's signature climate legislation, added over $700 billion for energy security, climate change, and renewables. In 2023, the solar industry grew by 51%, the largest historical year of growth to date. The same year, 53% of new electricity added to the grid was from solar, the most of any energy source. And last year, the US solar industry was valued at over $50 billion. And one of my favorite stats, from 1973, so dating back to when the first grid-connected solar project was hooked up to 2016, so about 4 decades, about 1 million solar projects were installed. And since then, so just 8 years later, another 4 million projects have been installed, totaling 5 million total systems. So things are really picking up. However, for the last 6 years, the US solar industry has had roughly 220,000 to 260,000 workers, give or take, with the majority of them being involved in installs. According to SEIA, to reach our climate goals as a country, the workforce needs to grow to more than 1 million workers by 2030. According to Engineering News Record, 44% of the solar industry's employers said that it was really difficult to find qualified applicants. And anecdotally, when I've spoken with solar CEOs, they've consistently said that their biggest challenge is finding and retaining good people. I've even seen executives make business decisions around certain employees, even if they're underperforming, assuming they're just barely competent. Engineering News Record also noted that there aren't enough training centers to meet demand. Now, there's some fantastic organizations out there like NABCEP, who Scanifly partners with. NABCEP is the industry's leading certification provider, and they have programs for multiple levels of installers, salespeople, batteries, and all the other crafts. Solar Energy International develops a ton of training programs for solar professionals, and it has a campus in Colorado and all around the world. It's actually how Scanifly's founders started to learn about the industry. The Interstate Renewable Energy Council, or IREC, which has Solar Foundation and the SolarSmart program, works with local governments to provide technical assistance to help streamline the integration of solar in different communities. And the Center for Renewable Energy Education, or the CREATE Group as it's known, is backed by the National Science Foundation, and that helps direct funding and resources to hundreds of training programs around the country. So there is training infrastructure. I'll buy it, we probably need a lot more. So why has the labor force remained flat? To be honest, I'm not really sure, and I don't think too many other people know either. And SEIA said that COVID knocked back the industry workforce by about 5 years. Because of market tightening and higher interest rates, many contractors have gone bankrupt and had to cut staff, which inevitably led to people exiting the space. And according to Forbes, we'll need around 500,000 solar workers by 2033, so about double the labor force we have now. And they cite a more systemic issue with not enough intentional training combined between educational institutions, employers, and governments. So there's clearly a skills problem, a skills gap in the US. And the best way to solve it is through education. That's why we've invited Daniel Castano, Scanifly's lead trainer and the person who helps guide Scanifly Academy to our podcast. Daniel's current day-to-day entails supporting solar installers on Scanifly, as well as training individuals and schools on the future skills they're going to need in our industry. Previously, Daniel was a surveyor for Namaste Solar and Arc Energy, and he also taught English in Taiwan. Welcome, Daniel.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So let's jump into it. I'd love to give you a chance to talk about how you got into the industry and walk me through your narrative about how you became a solar professional and what you've done in that journey.
Sure thing. So my journey started, you mentioned I was teaching English in Taiwan. That was after college where I studied sustainability studies at UF. And I knew that I wanted to explore different culture and make some impact to start by teaching. And I gotta say, it was really eye-opening going abroad and learning about a different culture and the way that different people live, and also the kind of environment that we find ourselves in when there's not as many regulations as there are here in the United States. A big part of that was definitely the pollution that we saw coming from mainland China, as well as, well, where I lived in Taichung, they had the world's largest coal plant just outside of city limits. So when there was smog over there, the locals referred to it as weather. Um, the fog would be the fog. The smog would be so bad that you couldn't see a skyscraper that would be, just 50 yards away. When I came back to the US, I knew that I wanted to get focused on not just a job, but a career. And I want to emphasize that because everything that you're mentioning about wanting to, or needing more workers, especially in the green collar workforce, is a lot of people that don't just need jobs, but a whole career with upward mobility and different options. And that's how I ended up getting really into solar. I knew that I wanted to get into energy so that we don't end up in a situation where we're continuing this cycle of increasing fossil fuels. And um, it just over time became really serendipitous to be able to not just get involved with a great organization and company like Namaste Solar, but find all of this exciting technology that helps get the job done so much quicker and so much more efficiently.
Hmm, that's awesome. I mean, what a contrast when you were in Taiwan and you're seeing all the pollution. Obviously, the U.S. in some cities we have those issues, but it's certainly not as bad on most days. Um, what was it like for you when you got back and you started your first day or your first week in that solar job? What was that transition like for you? How did that experience go?
So I do want to add a little bit to that since part of the theme of this is education. Um, to actually get into the solar industry, I started with some online classes. Just went into SEI, paid for a course that was all online, and then took my NABCEP PV associate exam.
Hmm.
So that was my main resume builder. I think, when I first started getting into applying for jobs and getting interviews and telling them all that I knew on paper, it was very different than what I actually could do out in the field. But like you mentioned, I also realized that a lot of the people that were out in the field may not have had a lot of solar experience at all. They might have been roofers or in construction in some way. And so it was really interesting to see like like to bring up that solar has a place for everybody in the workforce, right? There's blue collar workers, there's white collar workers, and together that makes up that green collar workforce. And so, yeah, it was very, very eye opening to see all of the skills that you need to develop over time, the kind of lessons that you just learned by actually being out and opening an electrical panel and getting up on a roof, and don't get me started on structural measurements and all of that stuff in the attic. That took some time to get used to. But it was really rewarding to actually be out there and feel like I was actually doing something to progress this um, these initiatives and these, I want to say, agenda to get more renewable energy out there.
I want to tell you about my first experience in solar because it reminded me of how you described the green collar economy. I spent this summer working for a local New Jersey contractor, and it was like 1.5 install crews, kind of a ragtag group. Companies trying to get started. And I remember it was an individual who had served in the military who had some carpentry skills. It was, and he was like a monkey on the roof. He was didn't wasn't feared of, didn't scare anything, right? Nothing scared him. We had an electrician who was a trained electrician, and that was his background. And he hated the roof to the point where he got these like Velcro moon shoes when he had to get on the roof, and it looked like he was hopping along Mars. I was kind of the guy in the ground, putting systems together and hoisting up rails and carrying panels up and finishing the day on the roof. And then we brought on a fourth guy. I think his name was Phil or something. He was like a 30-year plumber, and he looked like a plumber. He didn't last long. And I'm saying, yeah, plumbers certainly have a role in solar, but it resonated because there really wasn't a solar installer trained at that point in 2010. It was
Okay.
all these people from other industries, and coming together to learn the craft and to get comfortable with it and help grow that green collar economy. So it definitely resonated. I'd love to go deep on the institutions because you mentioned NABCEP and SCI, which are, I think, two major tent poles in the big tent of our industry's infrastructure for learning. Why did you choose them? And what was that experience like when you started learning about the industry and getting those skills? I'd love to hear what that was like digging into the training side for you.
Well, I'm really good at research. So I started, Googling away, very quickly ran into NABCEP. Again, being the most respected, well-established, and widely recognized certification organization for renewable professionals, it was a no-brainer to just aim for that certification right away. Um, Getting started with the training, it was really exciting at first. Getting to learn all of this stuff and knowing that I was going to build a career out of it was really, really motivating. However, it was really interesting to see, at least with SEI at the time, how quickly things move in the solar industry. Like we were learning about 250-watt panels. And now, if you're installing 250-watt panels, it's probably an RV or something, you know?
Remember the 190-watt Suntex back in the day, 2009.
Right.
The black on black BP panels. Most people don't know British Petroleum made panels. Back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wild. So yeah, it was nuts to again see that and then go out into the field and immediately see that increase in potential. Now we've got 500-watt panels, like half a kilowatt for commercial use. It's pretty crazy. So I think that that excitement of knowing that anything that I was learning in these online courses was going to help me get my job done and help me get a job in the first place was just such a huge motivator. I didn't think that online learning would be for me, but it certainly showed me that when that motivation and passion is there, and you could see it in the instructors too. Like everybody in this industry is very, very passionate about what they do, and I definitely think that it's infectious.
I would concur on the SCI side, which is they offer a lot of the training courses. Those people are diehards. They are phenomenal, and they are incredibly passionate about each curriculum they do. And obviously, we know the NABCEP folks really well, and what they've built in terms of setting a standard is also awesome. Let's fast forward a little bit to when you were working at these different solar contractors. Do you find that a lot of your colleagues had additional trainings or NAPSIP certifications or were pursuing learning different things?
Yeah, that's a great question. I like to think that PV photovoltaics is a pretty progressive industry, but it definitely depends on the company that you end up working with and what they value and what they place any emphasis on. I was pretty fortunate that, especially when I look for work, I'm looking for places that invest in their employees because that means that they want me to stay. Like I remember this quote that, and I paraphrase, it said, well, what if we train our employees and invest so much money in training them and then they go and work for somebody else? and somebody responds, well, what if we don't invest in them and don't train them and they don't leave for somebody else, right? So I think that that's uh, indicative of where talent is going. And I think that like, more specifically to your question, when I worked at ARIC, they paid for my OSHA 30. They wanted to know what other opportunities there were for training, and they actually paid us for every hour that we did in that OSHA 30. So they paid us for
Wow.
$30 for 30 hours worth of um, whatever our hourly rate was. So again, really motivating to get things done. And then Namaste Solar, same exact thing. They wanted to train you up. They wanted to get you experience, whether it was through certifications or allowing you to shadow other people who had roles that you were very interested in. I do think that there is some space and some room for them to know what options there are. Because what I often did run into is, well, what would you like to do? Or what would
Right.
you like to get trained in? Instead of saying, these are your options, you know, choose this and this is the space allotted for it. I think a little bit more of a proactive attitude could definitely be found in the industry a little bit more.
Yeah. Where I was thinking we would also go is I find that at certain companies with certain cultures, training, especially NABCEP associates or certifications, some additional coursework, like it's pretty common. And then there are other companies where it rarely exists, maybe one or two people. And it makes me think that going back to our prior topic of who's on your install crew, right? The bar to get into our industry is actually fairly low, depending on what role you start in. And so, if you are taking additional coursework while you're in the industry, you are light years ahead of people. And we've even seen it at Scanifly regarding drone certifications for surveyors and ops individuals and field tech people. I think we did a study where we saw the average hourly wage, this was a year or two ago, for a regular surveyor nationwide was between 18 and 22 up to $25. You add that drone license and maybe an OSHA certification, and you're now pushing mid 20s easily. Um,
Mhm.
and then you typically the installer is like, well, why would we want to pay more on an hourly wage? Well, it's like, well, because that drone pilot slash surveyor can now do triple the amount of sites, so everyone wins. So it's interesting because I think in the world of training, there's a lot of opportunities to enter and to grow one's skills and to be more dynamic in the industry. And yet, I find that a lot of our peers aren't always doing that. And so I say that to say, if you want to get into solar, don't worry, there's a place for you. And if you are in solar, continue to think about leveling up those skills because there's a ton of opportunities. So,
Right. And you know, if I say the same thing with well, you've already got the job. Why should you continue with education at all? Right? Well, let's say you want to get into commercial work, and sure, you have your job doing residential installs, and you know how to do everything, but you're not that interested in really finding out how inverters work and how that whole electricity flows from DC to AC and how that's what we use in the grid. All of that stuff, if you don't really care about it, you can do your job and you've got a living wage that you can earn in the industry. And if you're happy there, go for it. You know, there's beauty in finding something that you're good at and you can stay there. But if you want that upward mobility, there is room for that. And there are jobs that need that talent. And so the sky's the limit. Just keep learning. The CEO at Namaste Solar told me paper travels, right? So
mhm,
using that as motivation for get those certifications, get those pieces of paper that say, hey, you learned this thing.
yeah. Let's take that into your current role at Scanifly. All right. So one of the things you do is leading our academy. Why don't you talk about what the academy is, how it got started, what the academy is, and where do you want it to go?
Yeah, Academy. Love Scanifly Academy. So really excited to talk about this because it started, I want to say, as a humble webinar. Um, we wanted to create a space where we could let people know what the Part 107 is, which, disclaimer, it's a commercial drone pilot's certificate. It allows you to actually go out and fly drones commercially. Um, what it was, how to get started flying with Scanifly, or how to do 3D modeling in general. Um, and then this thing that was created so that we can onboard new um, surveyors and pilots to Scanifly, to something that could interest the industry as a whole. Fast forward to today, we now have a learning management system with 3 full courses. The Surveyor Associate Program, which is the evolution of that initial webinar. The Advanced Surveyor Program, which dives deeper into all of that data collection that I mentioned, the structural, the electrical, as well as some OSHA safety training. And then we have the Designer Associate Program, which gets Scanifly users and designers in general up to speed with some of the fundamentals of electricity, photovoltaics, and designing using remote imagery, satellite imagery, and of course, photo, photogrammetrically made 3D models, which is the 3D models that we make using those 3D image, using the 2D drone images.
So who would be someone that enrolls in the Scanifly Academy? Who's it for?
So we have a wide range of users. We have people who, again, as this began as a means of onboarding new users to Scanifly, um, it turned into educators coming across this content, which also provides NABCEP uh, CEUs. So if you want to recertify, you do have to collect a certain amount of continuing education credits. All of our courses have been approved by NABCEP, where you can get a total of 11 credits with the courses that we offer. So now we've got people that need onboarding to Scanify, those who need recurring credits for their certifications approved by NABCEP. And we have educators who are interested in this and have actually passed it on to their students. And that has led to this new iteration of Scanifly, where we started getting the attention of schools. We started talking to more professors at all levels, from technical colleges to universities to even high school teachers as well. And we have provided entire offering that comes with assignments, labs, and access to our software, which is so important to actually, be able to go out and have that hands-on experience with um, all the software that goes into it. Like I mentioned, it was so different learning the textbook version of all of this stuff. It's so different to get your hands on it. The software is the same exact thing. You can learn to design these systems, but it's not until you're actually outlining a roof and placing modules on there and seeing the shade analysis that you really get to understand every piece of that puzzle.
There's always a big difference between the very academic rote curriculum work that you do, which is not as industry specific, right? It's theoretical, it's conceptual, but it's not the day to day. And then there's actually what you can learn that is the day to day. And that is something that you really can stand on, whether it's in your interview or in your existing job. And I know the academy really tries to strike the right balance, but ultimately being very practical in nature, that people can take what they learn and apply it immediately into their day-to-day work. Um, so as it relates to the academy, I'd love to hear about um, you know what do people get out of it, right? If they do the academy courses, what do they get? Where do they take it? What happens next?
So we had a really big focus on that when we were trying to decide, well, what are the benefits to taking this course? Aside from that knowledge, going back to that paper travels, right? We wanted to create some resume builders, and that's essentially the prize for everything that you learn. We have a badge for each of our courses that is available through or that has Credly as a certifying force behind it, so that you can actually post those on LinkedIn, and any employer can click on those links and see all of the skills that you've earned, all of the certifications that you've learned. There are additional certifications that you can get in order to qualify for getting some of these, and that includes an OSHA certificate and the Part 107 license. There are some additional costs associated with getting that license, since that has to do with the FAA. And while we do set up a really strong foundation, um, we don't teach absolutely everything that you need for that license, which is why we've partnered with Drone Pilot Ground School to give a really amazing discount. If you use the code Scanifly at checkout, it's like a 66% discount off of a $300 course to get you ready for that Part 107 test.
So if I track this correctly, if you do the 3 courses for Scanifly Academy, you will come out with your drone license, your OSHA 10, at least 10 hours of NABCEP CE credits, if I recall correctly, and you'll learn how to be a surveyor, external and internal, right? So that's roof data, ground data, and electrical and structural, as well as design data, right? That's with the 12 hours of Scanifly coursework and a couple other hours for the other certifications. That's the academy in a nutshell.
100%. And you've set up a great foundation for getting NABCEP's PV Associate certification as well.
So in my mind, this pathway literally leads to at least a designer, surveyor, or field technician job in the industry. Uh, from your experience, like, what would you say are then the inhibitors for someone getting trained up? What's stopping people from doing this? Why are people not skilling up or pursuing this or using this as a gateway into the industry more so?
That's tough to say. I think one of them is just not knowing what your options are, right? I feel like people want to get started with some kind of career, but don't know that this is even an option, that they have these jobs waiting for them. I think sometimes people also want to guarantee that they'll get this job as soon as they graduate. Um, I really do think that finding out about these kinds of courses, getting started, really dedicating yourself to a career in this field, you'll really come to appreciate really quickly what these resources offer. So, really, I think again, what it comes down to is just finding out that these courses exist, that these options are out there, and being able to take the time to complete these classes.
If you hadn't taken your track of SCI and NABCEP, where do you think you would have been trying to get into the industry and in your career at this point?
It would have been difficult. I feel like I may have gone the door knocking route. In fact, I had already started training to go around knocking on doors. I'd memorized the speech and gotten all of the training before I landed
Can we
this
hear it?
job
Can we
out in
hear
the
it real
field.
quick? Can we hear
Oh
it? Do
my
you remember
goodness,
it?
at this point, it's
Give us
been
a quick
6
pitch.
years.
Give us a quick pitch. Let's hear it. I would love to hear this.
Oh
Do you
gosh,
remember it?
I don't at this point. Again, it was 6 years ago, and I remember it was like a 3 day back-to-back thing. I think the biggest thing that I remember is that even if they turn you away to be like, "Hi, my name's Daniel. We're with so and so energy company. We've been doing some installations on your neighbors' doors, and we decided to just come by, tell you a little bit about what we're doing. I don't know if you've been able to see the installations, but they've been able to completely get rid of their electric bill and have tons of savings. And at this point, if there's any kind of interruption or anything, it's always, no, well, I completely understand. I just want to let you know that, there are some other options, which, my hats off to the lack of ego or ego work that salespeople have to do to get rejected over and over and over again just to get that one sale. Um,
Little
yeah, so
humility
I
training.
think
That's funny. That's funny.
I would think I would have gone that route at first, but
Mm.
I'm really glad that I got the technical side of things, because that was always my wish. Is I just want to know how everything works before I start going into any other role.
And you think the training courses that you did really prepared you for that, is what I'm getting at here.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. And like I said, there's some gaps, and that's what I love about our courses is I did my best to build that bridge between textbook knowledge and practical knowledge. But I can't complain. It gave me such a strong foundation in understanding what we were doing out there. And even if it wasn't for my role specifically, I knew that I had to understand those workings so other people could do their job. And that was how I got the surveyor role of gathering all that data to pass on so that the rest of my team could get their job done.
Hmm. You talked about Scanifly Academy working with schools. Right? We've spent a decent amount of time talking about working with people in the industry or entering the industry, but talk to me about the partnership that you've struck with schools, if there are any right now that you can openly share. What does that entail? What does that look like?
So we're working with a number of schools. There's some that there's Cumberland County Schools in North Carolina, and that is actually a high school that we're working with, and a really progressive thinking high school. They have not only a renewable energy program, but a drone program. And so the school that is forward thinking and teaching advanced technology and the latest technology to their students was very interested in Scanifly because it was such a great bridge of those two things that not only connected those two things, but gave them potential career paths that they could take. So they were already doing all of the learning and classes for their Part 107. Some were taking some construction classes that taught them the OSHA. Scanifly Academy was just such a perfect fit to be able to get them, trained up with some more skills that are so transferable into the workforce.
Hmm.
It's a very similar situation with what we're doing in Wisconsin with some schools that uh, will remain nameless for now, but they've been working together. It's a part of the Create group, so I will mention that so far that you mentioned earlier, which is this network of 100 plus schools that are all focusing on renewable energy and teaching that to their students. And they're funded by through NSF grants, the National Science Foundation. And again, this just fits so well with their goals and the purpose of their funding of providing training to their students and actually being able to go out and do site surveys and take it a step further and even be able to design using structures from their commercial partners that their university is working with. So it's been really, really cool to see story after story of Scanifly just bringing these different parts of the training or schooling or partnerships that they currently have so that they can actually, again, provide marketable skills to their students.
That's pretty amazing that high schools are offering this type of training. I think about myself as a ninth grader or a 10th grader. What was I doing with my free time? You know, these people are getting solar and drone trained. It's pretty amazing for the next crop of professionals coming into our industry and hopefully filling that workforce gap that we talked about. Um, any good stories about any of the students that you've interacted with on through the academy that way?
Not upon graduation just yet. I know that in their journey, I've seen some really cool stories of like a group of students in Wisconsin that are actually also in a high school, going out, flying a site, designing that site, and then being able to present this at several workshops that they've been going to and displaying what they've been up to and kind of blowing some people's minds in the fact that, again, these high school students are actually going out, flying sites, and designing solar systems on there. And that was, again, like you said, I think of myself as a high school freshman or sophomore, and I definitely didn't have my commercial drone pilot's license, let alone designing PV systems.
Yeah. Wow. I remember we talked about a story at one other point, a school on the West Coast, where it was a technical college that was in a low income housing area and offered specific coursework for those people from that community. And it's very clear that when you pick up the certifications that Scanify offer, um, it is a pathway to a great middle aged job, or at least a springboard into that type of lifestyle. And I'd share with them that the studies we've done, you're looking at $20 to $25 an hour, consistent work. And at the time, we actually had several Scanifly contractors, partners of ours, that were asking for site surveyors. They didn't have, as we've learned from where the industry is at, they didn't have the resources. They didn't have enough surveyors and field techs. So we wanted to create a bridge with this school and some of the surrounding contractors in that area. And I think there's a real opportunity for linking up schools that are using the academy with solar contractors in that area to create a clustering effect for flowing of jobs with the next generation of skills that can come. So I think there's so much potential here, and I think we just need a little more of an oomph and a little more collaboration among the groups to see it happen.
Agreed. And that's been another just general really big goal of mine with Academy is maintaining these networks, getting everybody together, finding out what programs exist. Again, like I said, one of the biggest barriers is just people just don't know that this is an option. They want a job, they know that they want to get started with more than a job, a career. They just don't know what their options are or where to start.
And it often is the case that it just takes one course. And that was it for you. I'll share my
Right?
story. We installed a solar array on a canopy pole mount on the Student Union Center. It might have powered the one switch in the kitchen. It didn't have any benefit, but that's what catapulted me into the industry. All right, so Daniel, last words. I'd love for you to offer some recommendations for people who either are trying to get into the solar industry or are new into the industry, and offer them any advice for how they should do that.
So I'm going to shamelessly plug our own Scanifly Academy, right? Get started, sign up for our courses, scanifly.thinkific.com. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at learn@scanifly.com. I'm also going to do a quick shout out to NABCEP. You can always go on their website, and they've got tons of resources there where you can find out about all of their different career paths, all of the different certifications that they have. And again, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. Solar nerds love to talk about all things solar. And like you said earlier, Jason, we need as many people as we can get in this field to accomplish our renewable energy goals. And the funding is out there for all of this training. So just get started talking to people and don't be afraid to reach out with specific questions that you have. I left this part out of the story, not intentionally, but it's a great way to kind of end all this. I had actually reached out to one of the founders of Namaste Solar prior to even signing up for those SEI courses, saying, hey, this is my game plan to get into the industry. Do you think that this is a great way of getting started? And I kind of stalked him a little bit on LinkedIn and found out what his email would be. And he actually responded and said, hey, I can have a quick phone call with you if that helps. We got on a call and he said, yeah, I think that this is a great idea. What are some of your motivations? What are some of your goals? Uh, that sounds good. Go for it. And it all worked out. And if I can provide that kind of 10-minute call or guidance to anybody or even via email, again, it's just a quick email away and more than happy to point you in the right direction. I'm sure so many people in the industry would too.
So I think the takeaway here is get trained up, use the resources around you, and the rest could be history. You could be in the industry and really make some major changes. Daniel Castano, lead trainer for Scanifly Academy. Thank you very much for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me, Jason.